how important is architecture to people? How important? Architecture could be, you know, just, I mean, you see in a transportation net, what it is important is that the trains work. Also, not only structures who works, but also, and works well, you see, but also structures who are, in a way, a little bit enigmatic. Because enigma is a part of the art, you know. If you look, or if I look my own life, you see, at the speed of, you see, movements, you know, there is a very clear line. And it comes very much through this analytic understanding. And it is an analytic understanding without any fear. Why should I have fear? As Giacometti say, you know, Breton tell him, you know, tout le monde sait qu'est-ce que c'est une tête. Everybody knows what is a head. And he said, no, I do not know, I am interested, you know, to see. So it was, he recalled his right, you see, to analyze a head, as Rodin has done, as Bourdelle has done, and many, as Michelangelo has done, and many others. So I interpret this thing. Tout le monde sait qu'est-ce que c'est une tête. Everybody knows what is an arc. But I want also to analyze what is an arc. To sketch is a mental exercise. You could also write, or you could also compose music, or whatever. You see, it's a mental exercise who goes directly from your mind into your hand in a very spontaneous way. And probably is one of the most efficient ways, you know, to cap the idea and the vision you have in your mind, and also even to analyze it, to investigate, to let it change and transform. The drawings, maybe in the beginning, they are very imprecise. They became, with the time, more and more precise. They follow maybe much more the intuition, and then with the time, they became more and more construction drawings. I started more in an art school, went into an architecture school, then I went into an engineering school. For me, the work as a sculptor, it precedes the architecture. So saying, for example, you see I have a weight, this is rather heavy, I have even done them in stone, and then I am supporting it with a single element and then holding it, you see, by cable. In a way, it's the same thing who happened with my head. You see, my head is all supported here in the atlas. I can also twist my body, you see, and turn around. And these things, you see, very elemental things of the observation of the human body. I take the spine, which it is the basic reason why we stand up, and I started working with it as the basic idea to do our building.
he is an artist. He loves to draw, paint, and he has always, since from the beginning, always worked in sculpture. Also building some small prototypes when he was a student. And then after years, they became bigger sculptures, real sculptures, not just the prototypes. So I believe that architecture is art, should be art. I really think it should be art. It's not always art. If the bridges are beautiful. Just like sculptures in the landscape or in the cities.
In the early beginning, I was only doing balconies. I was doing, small balconies. I have done here in Zurich balconies, or for a bus shelters, you see, or a delivery dock, you see, of a railway station. I was proceeding a little bit to the research of a vocabulary through the sculpture. You see, I was proceeding, to find my own language, isn't it? What I wanted to find is my own language. Independent from schools, independent from tendencies, independent from any dictate. You see, to find my own vocabulary, thinking that I have the right to say whatever I want to say in my own manner. You see, the first goal in this place was to deliver something beautiful where such an ugliness was there before, you understand? To deliver something optimistic and looking to the future, where so much sadness and depression, was there in the beginning, isn't it? This was our goal, not only my goal, the goal of my client, the Port Authority, the goal of every worker, and everybody who has put hands to the job. I like the idea of being an artist. But being an artist, it does not mean, living in another world or living in, but working very hard and thinking and analyzing that this, what you are doing, can have also a higher signification. I mean, that simply doing a platform, where people will wait to get a train, can be also a beautiful place, just that. Or thinking that the arrival of somebody coming from abroad into a city like New York can be a beautiful experience. Or bringing light deep down, to show the people you are already in a plaza of New York. But finally, is work that you have to deliver, isn't it? And work that mostly goes, you see, over hundreds and hundreds of sketches and hundreds of tries, you see, believing that inside each one of us, yourself, myself, every person you see, whatever, even the most modest person with which you have to deal, there is a source. And this source can deliver quality and can deliver or never will stop, to deliver, so far you do not stop working on it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good evening. Good evening again. Hope you all can hear me and you'll be able to hear us. My name is Nikita Polyakov, and I will walk you through tonight's discussion. I would like to welcome you all in this inspirational space called Camp. And this event is organized by IPER and National Prague's Gallery. And I would like you all to welcome our distinguished guests, Santiago Calatrava.
No, Santiago.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Santiago. Santiago Calatrava and Cristina Carrillo de Albornoz, curator of Santiago's exhibition Art and Architecture that is going to start tomorrow at Stone Bell House. So please welcome again our guests. And thank you. The reason why Santiago is here tonight is the exhibition, and in the next 45 to an hour, we'll be able to discuss his work and maybe give you some inspiration for the exhibition that you will be able to see tomorrow. I would like to start off, and basically this is the question to both of you guys. It's going to be at Stone Bell House tomorrow. It is inspired by natural world, human anatomy, all your works, and the exhibition confirms it. Maybe Christine, can you tell what was the impulse to decide to have it in Prague? I know you have an interesting story surrounding this.
In fact, it's very interesting, and it's magic. Also, like when you see the structures of Santiago Calatrava, you feel magic. So sometimes in life it happens. And last summer, I was doing an exhibition here, and we have a dinner, and there was the mayor of this city, and she was just coming back from New York, and she told me, I have seen the best building of the 21st century, and I asked her, what is this building? And she said, it's the Oculus, the PATH station that Mr. Calatrava has built there. So I was very moved, and also she said with a great emotion, and she has a very artistic mind. And so I told her that I've been working on and off with Mr. Calatrava for 10 years. We did the exhibition in Hermitage, and she said, we have to take him here. And that determination, and it started to move everything. So that's how it started, and she was also very generous because she offered us different spaces. And finally, I decided that, the best space would be the Stone Bell House, which, as you know, is a Gothic palace. And, the Gothic style, maybe at the beginning you can say, well, this is not going to fit, but the architecture of Santiago Calatrava is in alignment with all the values of Gothic architecture, from light to the verticality, and also, with this sense of and the need to go beyond the material to the immaterial, the search of the spirituality. So all that is in architecture of Santiago Calatrava is in the Gothic. So when you see the exhibition, you feel that it belongs there, and it's very good. And it's just a few words about the exhibition, and of course Santiago Calatrava will talk about his work. The exhibition is art and architecture, so it's not only about the architecture, but about his art, because as you know, he's an sculptor. As he was describing here, the architecture comes from the language of his sculpture, and also he's a painter, and he's a ceramist also, so you will see a lot of all the disciplines. And also I hope the exhibition will invite you to discover how all the arts have no boundaries, they are all interconnected, and how Santiago Calatrava work can also combine the spiritual with the reason, with the geometry, with the poetry, all elements that you may think at the start will not be together, they are together. And also the space, finally, this exhibition is very special because it has a lot of drawings. You know, drawing is for Mr. Calatrava, it's a sense of his way of really getting, is the process of creating. For each project, he draws thousands or even hundreds of drawings, and in each of the projects you will see drawings there. So it will take you to the mind of the architect, and also to the sense of intimacy, which is also the way in which all the works are done. So I hope you enjoy the exhibition.
Thank you very much, Christine. Santiago, the exhibition is called Art and Architecture. You are an artist, you're an architect, you're an engineer as well from your profession. How are these three concepts, subjects, courses, so to say, compatible, complementary to each other in your work? Can you maybe expand on this a little?
Yes. First of all, let me say a couple of words about the fact of having the honor of exhibiting in this wonderful city, Prague, and also in this very special place. I mean, I knew Prague, but in an afternoon like this afternoon, so beautiful under the sunlight, and seeing the river and the boats and the bridges and the Carl Bridge and the sculptures and the pinnacles of the cathedrals and churches and all these incredible ensemble of architecture, you see. So you really believe again that architecture can be something extraordinary, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And this is the... Then also visiting the exhibition, I have to say, I appreciate enormous much the fact of exhibiting in this very particular place and going from one room into another and seeing the work in a very dense manner, because since the rooms are not very big, you go very close to the models, to the sketches and all of that. So I think it was very moving for me this afternoon, even the fact of being here now with you and having these fantastic people listening to me or to us, isn't it? You see, about the different, coming back to your question, you see, it is interesting almost after, more than 36 years of work as a free architect and engineer and also working as an artist, you think that the things doesn't happen by case, that it is almost like a compound of facts. You see, my first inclination was to be eventually a painter or to be an artist, and in the fact, after having done the maturity, I went to Paris to l'École des Beaux-Arts. But it was 68, it was summer 68, and the school was destroyed, isn't it? So I couldn't, during, I think, 2 years, there was almost also not teaching and all of that. So I went back to Spain and I enrolled in the Polytechnic in the architecture school because I thought it's the most convenient it was an attractive solution, and I was also interested, particularly after visiting Paris and seeing Notre Dame. So they are, I mean, it seems to be a little bit banal, but it is not. It is effectively, I remember I was working in a place called La Rue Chanoinesse, and Notre Dame was just 2 streets apart in l'Île de la Cité, and sometimes at 11, something like that, I got a break and entered into the church and saw the light. All of that, I thought, my goodness, architecture is something extraordinary, isn't it? But then also the interest in the profession, also, and particularly in the material part of the profession, and the way how things are done and why they stay, who moves me also later to go. Nevertheless, also eventually, because I was too lazy to start to work when I was 23 or something like that, so I went to study engineer, and I studied the full studies of engineer, and even I have done a PhD or a doctorate, doctor work in Zurich in even more technical, you know, getting into topology problems and foldability, and so, I mean, this, let's say, finally, when I look back, I think I was privileged, you know, to make those choices and also have the patience to stay for so long time as a student until I started the profession. So indeed, if you look, there is a kind of introspective way into different professions to discover that finally it's almost all the same. There is not a big difference between engineering and architecture. Certainly not, you know, I mean, it is almost a convention that we say those guys are architects, those others are engineers. So I mean, you see, a bridge is as important as a house. Or an intervention in the landscape, even in landscape-wise, and so the work of the engineer and environmental related is also enormously important, isn't it? But I stay all this time always following my first impulse, who was always to draw and to do sculptures, you see, for. And I have done that along all those years. You see, sometimes always a little bit in the background, because effectively my modus vivendi was, you see, to be an architect or an engineer, but I have been painting, I have been sculpting all my life. Until I discovered the importance of this kind of secret or atelier, you see, in which I was painting, sketching, and sketching, and sketching, and painting, and holding these things a little bit in the back, because I'm bringing it into models and all things that, and from the model on into the building, for me, there was the thing who came out of my work. But in the fact, without this research, I think buildings like Tenerife or Ground Zero or even Stadelhofen, or even the first building, you know, will not be like they was. In a way, you see, I also understood what means l'atelier de la recherche patiente by Le Corbusier. He called it like that. But I mean, it is the fact that you have to create, or at least I try to create in my background, or in my backyard, a kind of work who has given a solid basis, at least according to my own feeling, not eventually this of the critics or the people, or I mean, but has given a base to the architecture as a product. And I think the exhibition shows that very well. It shows it very well, because full of sketches, free sketches, and some of them very informal. And then even studies of the human body, and so it has a little bit a kind of disordinated way, you see, but finally you see the buildings there, and you see also the sculptures there. And so, I mean, I do not know if I answered properly your question, but...
We'll continue, we'll get to it. It's a broad question. You were mentioning infrastructure buildings. You work mainly building public buildings, yeah. Not working for private businesses. In this context, there's a lot of discussion what should be the role of architect in today's society. Should he have any? What do you think, the role?
You see, the fact of working for public buildings has eventually also a personal inclination, you know, it's a personal inclination, the importance of the public work, because as the word say, public work is for the public. So you are working for the public. You are not working for a private. You are working for the public. That's, I mean, sometimes, you know, it's as easy as that. At the other side, it is also because I has had to look for work, and the only source I found to get it is doing competitions. And I was telling to Cristina before, I have the number of competition I have done, 136 competitions. Actually, you see, I will keep doing, so it will eventually increase the number. But I mean, it is the source who brought me to do the station, to do whatever, you know, whatever, a building, the Lisbon that we are seeing here, to Liège, to Lyon, to, and so it's a very hard, it's a very tough way, you know, to get commission. Of course, it's much easier if somebody comes and says, I like you, I love your work, and make me a wonderful house. I will do also that. But until today, you see, I got this. I mean, I has been looking for work in the competition. See, these are these two aspects. At the end, you love this type of work. And I tell you why. Because finally, mostly you are confronted to a client who is embodied in eventually a civil servant or an institution. And in a way, delivers you an enormous freedom. You see, and also you legitimize your intervention through the fact that you has win it through a competition, isn't it? And so you have a certain legitimacy to do your own vocabulary, to be a little bit yourself, isn't it? This is, but also at the other side, I think is a magnificent sensation. You see, to see that, or to hear that the station in New York is visited every day or used every day by more than 300,000 persons a day. I mean, whatever good you do, whatever you do there, you know, and you express there in terms of touching the sensibility of the people and contributing, you know, to give them a better day, is even as important than in extraordinary institutions, like think about the Louvre or the Metropolitan. You know, they get 12 million visitors a year. After 3 days, the station gets 1 million. And it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's something, so whatever you do there, maybe many people don't get it, but they get it still, you understand? So you are touching enormous much people that eventually will never, it's a pity, you know, but they will never go to the Metropolitan because, you know, already the facade makes a barrier, you understand, and so on. So you see, which it is a pity, I think, you know, eventually this needs also to be rethink, you know, how we can bring art closer to people. Certainly, a way is using places like stations, railway stations, or even bridges, you know, to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, your bridge here, you know, the Carl Bridge, is eventually the most beautiful example worldwide, you know, how to bring a sculpture, how to bring to the people the sense that arriving into a place, getting across a gate, being in the center of an extraordinary city, you see, you are surrounded from, you are in a piece of art, isn't it, a living piece of art.
Mm-hmm. In your documentary that we just watched, you talked about art in the context of enigma, that the structures need to be enigmatic and that you try to use it in your work. What does it mean? Enigmatic structures and enigmatic art?
Yes.
Some sort of
you know, there is a piece of music called the Enigma Variations by Elgar. Enigma Variation, and there is, I think it's the number 12. It's called Nimrod. Nimrod. I would like to hear it now. I let you hear the Enigma Variation now. The number, I think, is the number 12. In any case, the name is Nimrod. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. So I think I mean, just because you use the word enigma, it's interesting, you know, the fact of the language applied to architecture, you see, because it's a beautiful word, you see, it's like the mystery or also you could speak about poetry and things like that, but they are all words. And architecture is architecture, you see. So one of the things I discovered after having done this long way, you know, studying architecture and then studying engineering and then even, and so on. So it is even paying a lot of attention to the structure to discover that, I mean, at least now, that even architecture goes beyond all those things, you know. It's something very abstract, you know, extraordinarily abstract. Extraordinary abstract, that even has nothing to do with the material of the things, isn't it? So because they are buildings who are done in steel, and others who are done eventually in canvas, and others who are done like theater scenographies or things like that, others who are done in stone, like your cathedrals, and with the copper roofs, and even with the gold globes on top of it. And then you see, finally, all of them, they deliver us sensations, you see, who we can feel them in a very deep manner, and they can even move us. And this is the extraordinary thing, isn't it? It's eventually, because that the word enigma is very beautiful, because enigma is something mysterious, is something, but what is an enigma, you understand? And I think also, because that I jump also to make it even more complicated and spoke about music, isn't it? Because it's something also, the music eventually is even clearer for me because it's untangible. And it happens in a moment and then disappears, you know. It's even, and it touches us and moves us, you know. Those who can this evening hear Nimrod, the variation of Elgar, you know, the enigma variation, I think they should do that. It's extraordinary. It's a good way also to conclude the day.
We'll definitely listen to it after our speech. Before we go on, I would like to ask if it would be possible to show a couple of your projects, and if you'd be so kind to maybe give a little elevator speeches. There is 4 projects that you did that we chose to talk about in the next couple of minutes. The first is the Oculus, much discussed work of yours in New York, the transportation hub. That's not Oculus. I'm sorry.
So, but we
can start. We can start with this.
Well,
okay.
Malmo.
Let's start.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I don't know if they're going to switch it more or not. Okay, we can we can do the
maybe
do the house,
we start by the next one, by the torso.
The torso.
Yeah.
Let's do the torso. Can we switch one more, please?
Yeah, because I think one of the working with Mr. Calatrava is I feel that is always, as you say, enigma, and it's always an enigma how how the buildings appear, you know, because when you enter into the exhibition, because Prague is a city of towers, you are going to see the tower of Dubai, his building, and that tower was born. The origin was a lily, the flower of a lily. And, you know, it could be that, or it could be like maybe the torso, you know, the human torso then becomes a sculpture and then a building.
We'll definitely have to talk about the motion and the body present in your work, because you'll see tomorrow the exhibition is full of the analogies. But back to the Oculus, one of the latest projects, and basically you said that one of the most challenging for you in one of the interviews. Is that correct? Why is that?
Yes, yes. If we can step back...
We are not there. I'm sorry, we are not there.
Into the Oculus, if we can step back.
Now this is Malmo again. This is a tower.
Okay.
I was saying...
They don't want us to talk about the Oculus.
No, because you see, it is about... eventually, the Oculus has had for me also... let's say, in terms of understanding in a personal manner, you know, what architecture can be, you see, was for me an important step. And I explain you why, because so we arrived to New York immediately after September 11, and we established in New York as a family, because my kid was going to the university in the States, and first was my wife who moved to New York, and then myself, I was commuting between Europe and New York, and then we was invited to participate in the competition and the first, you see, and I arrived with a very clear idea, very different from the master plan, and that we have to separate the station and make from the station an autonomous building. I was also conscious that the station was very important because it was linking, you know, from one end to another of whole ground zero, and also being delivering also the basis on which the building has been built. Now, it was an important job, but I arrived, you see, in a very unconventional manner. I say, look, we better change the master plan. We put the piece in the center, and then we make a kind of a sculptural building, which it is this here, what we are seeing. Also good, you know, even, you know, the sculpture, you see the building is effectively very sculptural and remembers a little bit the research I was doing at the time, you know, who was sculptures with points and a bit more, you know, coming from not so much from a pure abstraction, but remembering maybe a little bit the growth of plants and all of that. Now, there was a moment in which, you see, if you look at the building is a little bit disoriented in relation to the grid of New York. You know, New York has a very strict grid, you know, Fulton, Greenwich, and Church Street, you know, they are all perpendicular, you see, and the building should be also following these parallels. But I tilt the building in a way that the center of the building follows a direction. And we was lucky that the towers, as we are seeing them here, you know, they let a gap in between. And then what happens is that, you see that the roof you see there, you know, can open. So when you go in a regular day, it's always closed. But the gap, which is 80 meters long, can open. I thought this is an opportunity to do something extraordinary because the client has lost so much people, you know, in the tragedy. And the client, I speaking with the client and analyzing, you know, the wish of the client, they wanted to do something extraordinary to remember the people who passed away. So by tilting the building and letting this gap of 80 meters, the gap can telescopic, you know, setback. And then you are inside the building and you have a gap who is around 6 meters wide and 80 meters long from one end to another, and you are seeing the sky of New York. So far, so good. It's like the Pantheon in Rome. For those who knows the Church of the Pantheon in Rome, you know, everybody outdoors goes in, you know, to see the same sky that they have, but they see it through the oculus, you know, in top of it. Indeed, the central part, they call it oculus. Now, we was lucky because the two towers are allocated in a way that the sun goes between the towers, and there is a moment in which the sun enters through the center of the gap and create in the ground a way of light. I call it like that, a way of light. So from one end to another in the paving, you have this 6 meters wide and over 80 meters long way of light marking inside the hall. Now, there is a moment, and there is 2 days in the year in which the sun goes through the exact middle at 10:29, 10:30. One day is the 29th of March, the other is September 11. And in September 11, at 10:30, the second tower collapsed and all was dead. So in a way, you see, in the most immaterial way you can imagine, which it is using the light of the sun and the atmospheric ambience inside, you are paying homage to the memory of those who passed away. And this is what you can do with architecture, isn't it? And you see, the weight of all of that is 0 grams, is nothing, no weight, nothing. It's like music. You understand? It's boom, something who happens, and you see, a couple of seconds later, it's already gone. You see, and I mean, this dimension of architecture for me is like a new discovery. But you see, it's very far apart of any structural. Of course, you need to know something about the structure to let the two wings, you see, free
along 80 meters, and that it works, and when the wind and the snow and all of that, it's also, I mean, it's necessary to know that. But even that, is just subsidiary. Do you understand? The fact is this a fact that it will remain there for years and eventually for centuries until the people forgot September 11, like it happened, with the monuments for wars and things like that and tragedies, and so it's a matter of time, and we forgot that Athens was burned down, and Jerusalem also, and Rome and many other cities has been bombed and all of that. But I mean, it's interesting to see how architecture is immaterial. You understand, and it is untouchable. You see, almost that it is abstract.
Thank you. Can we please have another picture?
Yes, maybe we can talk about one more project, maybe torso.
Well, yeah, let's do the torso, and I would like to see as well talk about the bridges for a little while, because the bridges.
So the torso and the bridges.
The torso, yes, you can stay there. The torso. You work with a lot of. You draw a lot of bodies. Yeah, and you work with a lot with the concept of the body, with the shape, with motion, and you projected it in this building. How did you think when you designed it?
Yeah, you see, the torso is done with a series of cubes,
Yeah, 9 of them.
And I use the word cube because also in the movie we saw before, I started working making. I cannot call them sculptures, but working with cubes and allocating them. I spoke in the movie saying, how our head holds, or our body, or how we stand up, and the vertebral column, but always getting into a very, in a very intense abstraction. Abstraction, who for me was not unfamiliar, because it's like the statical model in engineering. You see, so the statical model in engineering is already an effort, you see, to make an abstraction of the reality. You see, if you think a tree, for an engineer, is just a cantilever, you see, who receive a certain loads and all of that, and the form, and all of that. So the sense of abstraction almost like Mondrian, you see, also make abstraction of a tree, with lines and stuff. So this thing is very common for engineers, you see, to go into, is an abstract world who try to find identities with the nature, you see. Maybe later on I will do a drawing, because I want to explain that clear, it's important that the people understand that. So the cubes came to me even before, because the work I have done for my thesis at the Zurich Polytechnic started with a cube. You see, so a cube put in the main diagonal, collapsing, becoming an hexagon, and then this hexagon getting together into one line. The whole thesis is about geometrical transformations. So the cubes has been for me like the essence of how to pack a space in an efficient way. And, also, you see, using cones. You can see in some of the sculptures here, you can see that using a small cone, using cables for the static and things like that. Now, you see, it was an enormous chance here in the turning torso to pass almost from a sculpture to pass into a building. You see, as an experiment, isn't it? It's not, I do not think there will be many turning torsos around. What the people discover is maybe that building can twist, isn't it? That is interesting, isn't it? But even I have done also in Chicago a building called the Spire, you see, who will not get realized, who has also this principle of twisting, which it is common also in the growth of trees and in many structures, natural structures, because the Coriolis acceleration of the earth, who brings a structure to grow in a certain movement. So, I mean, in this kaleidoscope, you see, of ideas, that is what I would like now, to emphasize, to make also even your question much more confused. You see, in this kaleidoscope, from trees to the human body, to the head, to the collapsibility of a cube. And so, you see, how to find a way and arrive into an efficient building in which people can live and became, let's say, and the fact of also realizing it. So no, I think I didn't answer your question very properly.
Okay, maybe you can draw it. Maybe you can.
Yes, yes, I can draw. Yes, let me do.
That would be
some yes.
Yeah, and the question: can we please switch to last picture, and will be the Doha Bridges project.
And we can, because in the exhibition, of course,
I saw it.
There are two sections of bridges. Of course, as you know, Santiago Calatrava has redefined the language of bridges. And also in a way sculptural bridges. So there are two sections also giving a connection again to Prague. And this is the last project in Doha, which has three bridges together, maybe.
Yeah, yes.
It's your work.
Yes, coming back, you see, to the way how I think I am not answering your question. It is, I would like to give the impression, to the people sitting here, at the one side, you see that, and I think it works very well with the exhibition, it is that the turning torso, as precise as it appears, you see, as exact as it appears, is the result of, let's say, almost an enormous convection of things who started maybe 20, 25, or 30 years before turning torso. And I come with that, again, because eventually they are here, architecture students and other people who are hearing me. Finally, this research, you see, this patience of work with cubes without thinking on a building, or watching, you see, my kids, who started, standing up, and then you see how complex it is to stand up, isn't it? And you see, and that it's very natural for us to stand up, but, we have to learn that, And then thinking just about why we stand up. Nothing to do with architecture, but still a lot to do with architecture, because, thinking on a tree and the fact that a tree twists, or, I mean, if you go around yourself, with open eyes, with an open mind, and you conserve the capacity of surprise, you see, and of admiration of this, what is happening around you, you see, you are creating slowly, slowly a baggage from which then a building like an anomalous building like turning torso can appear, you see. I regret, you see, because you see how things are, because there was also another competition, but I didn't take part in there in Malmö. And then later on I thought, what a pity, because they wanted to do a station and it was possible to do another skyscraper. They never realized it. Then I thought I will do, you see, I have done two of those sculptures. One is like that and the other is very straight. If I could do the straight figure, put one cube more, and I will call it Romeo. Then the turning torso will be Giulietta. It's even to confuse more the things. But think about, there are two fantastic buildings of Alvar Aalto called Romeo and Giulietta. You see, that is also, it's not an invention. I don't know, other guys like Aalto has been eventually, I was very lucky because I could shake hands with him. I went to Helsinki direct to his office just to shake hands with him, because I was a young student, 21 years old, but I wanted to know Alvar Aalto. But I say that because, you see, it's very often, you see, the source of architecture is the life, is everything. Is everything, you understand? Everything. Is the water this afternoon, the silver reflects on the water, the small boats, but forgot the boat, the silver, you see, and the dark of the walls behind, like a painting of Rothko or something like that. So is this, I mean, we have to preserve intact the capacity of admiration, you understand? And wandering life and wandering and enjoying, and opening our heart, to places like Prague, opening our heart, let's enter in, you see, to see those yellows, those colors, the yellows and beige yellow colors of your facade. A little bit in Italian, you say shall be, washed by the water, you see, of the rain of the many years. So, I mean, those is so enormous interesting, isn't it? And it makes also your life in a way, you see, for yourself, not no revolution, no thing, it's just a personal matter, but it makes it even eventually, I mean, you have something to watch all the time, that is what it happens.
Thanks. I hope there will be a chance, or the audience will have a chance to see more of your work during the exhibition, because we don't have time to discuss all of it. So if you step back and go back to the city, basically, and the environment we live in, and in the context of buildings, in the context of architecture, how difficult or easy is to design buildings for an unknown future, basically? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how when you start doing Oculus, there was nothing there.
Yes.
The context. How hard is it?
Because you say an unknown user. I like also this way. There is a very good writer, an Italian guy called Matteo Marangoni. He wrote a book in the 20s called Saper Vedere, How to See. And then he shows a photo of the Milano Centrale, the central station of Milano, is written there, done in the year, let's say, 2030 something of the Christian era, 10th of the fascist era. You understand? And the guy writes down below, Tomba dell'ignoto viaggiatore, who means the tomb of the unknown traveler. You see, I like what a courage, to write that at this time, you understand? Because it's a little bit, also the architecture can be enormous declamatory, but not interesting, isn't it? Not interesting. So also ideology and architecture works also together, you see. It's as abstract as architecture can be. You see, for example, I give you a good, in Spain, one of the most wonderful architectures in Europe is the Arabic architecture in Spain. For those who visit the Mosque of Cordoba, they have a little bit difficulties to understand. It's a Christian cathedral. It's a Catholic cathedral. But it's the mosque, it's a mosque. So you can see, so, particularly in those days, it's so interesting to discuss about the same vocabulary, used for a mosque, apply for a cathedral. But if you go to Toledo and you see Santa Maria la Blanca, then you believe you are in a mosque. No, you are in a synagogue who has been transformed in a church. Extraordinary. So the architecture can be, when it is pure, when it is beautiful, when it is, it comes from the heart. You understand? Even the decoration, so you can read, the Arabic architecture as much as the Jewish one. They say they took it very serious, the question of not making pictures of your God. So they went into the abstraction, the geometry, the calligraphy, the Alhambra. Somebody called Rafael Borràs, who was professor of Arabistic in Spain, wrote a book called The Most Expensive Edition Never Done. This is the Alhambra, because it's all written, all over. There are texts, surahs of the Quran, poems, things like that. Incredible, It's all about writing, in the architecture. You see, this is the fascination, that the architecture and the lesson we should learn. Architecture is very abstract, and it's the most abstract of all arts, isn't it? And it's so diverse. And I want to share those thoughts with you, because this is what I am discovering in the last years, or in the last days, it's interesting, to see. The more I work, the more I see there is still enormous much to learn, isn't it?
I like the magic that's surrounded around your works, and you talk about values a lot when you talk about architecture. Actually, in many interviews you did that. Norman Foster once said that architecture should be the embodiment of values, civic values. So the way we build transposes to the way we live. Do you agree with that?
Certainly.
Do you agree with this?
You see. It comes also to me another important point, speaking particularly to the young architects, is that, you see, the 20th century will be very different of the 21, as the 19th century is very different from the 20th. In the 20th century, a lot of doctrinary attitudes. So the people wanted to save the world. They wanted to transform it. You know, they say, we have to do chairs. You understand the Bauhaus, you know, chairs, you see, that everybody can use. We should do chairs for everybody, you know. And we discovered that they have not done chairs for everybody, and they has done few chairs, some of them very beautiful. If you think on Mark Stam or Marcel Breuer or others, you see, and if you find one of the original ones, it costs a fortune. So, I mean, it's almost a contradiction. You see, they wanted to save the world, you know, and make chairs for everybody, and one of those chairs, they cost a fortune today, you know, because they are part of museum pieces and things like that. Then also this idea, you see, of having a rhetoric of trying to save the world. You understand? No, I mean, this is not my rhetoric. My rhetoric is enjoy my profession. And what I try to open the eye to the young student here, it is, you know, open your eyes, you know, just enjoy. See how beautiful green is, you know, how beautiful silver, the silver reflections in the water. Shout, how wonderful are those golden globes, you know, in top, that we will not know how to use that. We has lost the sense of using gold. When in the old architecture, you see, they has used it in an enormous, beautiful and proper way. Look at the, you know, look Paris, you know, and the monuments, and, you know, look Le Pont Alexandre III, you know, with the Pegasus, you know, and the wings. So we cannot do those things anymore. I do not know why, you know. Look here also the wonderful doors of the, and gates and details and balconies, you see, and grids in the balconies with, you know, gold plate and the green copper and all of that, you know, extraordinary. And in my opinion, finish with the rhetoric, you know, the redemption rhetoric, you know. What about, you know, we are all hypocrites, you know, we are here sitting very peaceful, and eventually in the Mediterranean, you know, people are dying in the boats, you know, trying to arrive to Europe. And the European community is discussing how many refugees we want to take, and Hungary is closing the border, you know, towards, I mean, we are seeing that as much as the people, you know, during the 30s and the 40s, they completely ignored the pogroms against the Jews and the concentration camps and all of that. Do you see what I mean? We have to be sincere with ourselves and try in a very modest way, you know, to just make good this what we can do good. Do you understand? And in my case, you see, I am enormous lucky, you see, of the 300,000 guys, you know, who are eventually, who knows, you know, enjoying my station, you know, a day, you know. But, I mean, even if I do a chair or if I do a modest thing when I started doing a balcony or things like that, I have done that with the same spirit and the same joy.
Yeah, so maybe, you know, with this message to the young people, and also, you know, Mr. Calatrava always built with the idea that one is building something that will remain for the future, is the legacy for the future generations. Maybe because there is an audience here, we can let them to ask 3 questions, or just one?
We have 3 to 4, yeah. Well, I have one more, because since you stayed with the students, there will be many young architects, future architects sitting here. One short one. Do you know something today that you learned later and that you feel pity that you didn't know when you were young? Maybe an advice to young people that are going to be architects, that are studying architecture schools, that are doing art, something that you didn't know, that you know now, that's valuable for you today?
Well, I think, you know, sometimes when even it happens to me today, continues happening, you know, is the doubt of this, what I'm doing, makes sense or not? Or the doubt, you know, what will be my future? You see, when I was younger, you know, what will be my future? How let's say, how I will sustain my family. You know, You see, in the beginning, you see, I started in Switzerland. I didn't, like I say, I has had very little relations, and I has had to find a way, you see, to maintain an office and also to sustain my family. And I would like to say to them, don't worry, you know, it will work. That is the first thing.
It's a good end.
This is the first thing I will say. Don't worry, you know, don't lose your energies and that, you know, just work. Concentrate in your work, have a joy, you know, open your eyes, don't feel bad, you know, your time will come. Mm-hmm. This is what I will say.
I think it's nice answer. You guys, we've got time for 3 nice questions, so if you have any, just please raise your hand. We have catchbox microphone, just to tell you, so we're gonna throw it at you, so don't worry. Yeah, it's there. Okay. There is a gentleman in the second row.
Good evening to both of you. You spoke very nicely about the Charles Bridge, the Gothic one with the statues. It might come as a surprise to know that this city is also a city of falling bridges and bridges in danger of falling. And I just wonder if you would consider building a bridge for Prague, and if you did consider it, what would it look like, given that you fairly know the city? Thank you.
¿Qué es lo que ha dicho? Perdona, es que no entendí.
Que dice que Praga es una ciudad que los puentes se están cayendo y que, bueno, que cómo lo ves, pero que si considerarías construir un puente aquí y si lo construyes, que cómo sería el puente.
Sí, sí. Look, you see, I think effectively, you know, the river is, you know, for cities who are built in a river like yours, is a privilege, isn't it? The river is the emissary of the nature. You see, in a way, if you look particularly if you look the Roman foundations, they are all done on rivers. So the Romans arrived and used the rivers as a frontier, natural frontier, and then they built a bridge. And then they install on the side where they arrive the so-called castra, who is the camp. And the river was a natural frontier, and then they built a small fortress on the other side. You can see that very clear in Cordoba. Cordoba has still the Calahorra, which it is the fortress, you know, who defends the bridge, and then you have the city, the Roman city just behind. Even the ruins are there. It's extraordinary. The word castra is also interesting because many British cities like Chester, Manchester, Winchester, and so Chester means castra, who means camp. Very interesting, isn't it? And the major part of the capitals in Europe, the capitals are Roman foundations. So Vienna, so Lutetia, who is Paris, or let's say Londinium, who is London, and so on. You see, so far I know, Madrid is not a Roman foundation. Still is a small river, but it's not a Roman foundation. And I say that because effectively, you know, the river keeps an enormous character. And they are cities who take it up front, you see, and your city is one of them. And effectively, so is Paris, by the way, so is Paris. You see, everything happens along the river like the river was the vertebral column of the city. And the bridges are effectively, you see, let's say, the places, the links between and consubstantial with the city. So imagine for a moment, I know less your city than Paris, you know, but speaking about Paris, imagine Paris without bridges, you know, will be another city, you know. Will be, you understand? I mean, people could go also with tunnels, you understand? I am thinking on tunnels or things like that, you know. But, I mean, bridges are fundamental, are essence, they are in the origin of those cities. Your Carl Bridge, you know, is a marble, you know, is also the salon of the, you understand, the salon where the people go, you know, just for a promenade, with this fantastic idea of the sculpture, who, in my opinion, precede the sculptures of Il Ponte di Sant'Angelo, you know, from Bernini in Rome, you know, who brings you into the fortress of Sant'Angelo, you see, and with the angels, you see, and so. But the tower, the gate to the bridge, and all these things. I mean, you see here in this city an enormous lesson for the young people, you see, who in a way they learn it in the real way, is living in, without wondering, just passing the Cal Bridge every day, is this what it is? It's like people say in Venice, that somebody came to Venice and say, well, the bridges in Venice, they should have handrails, protected against children. Somebody said, the Venetian children, they never fall in the canal. They are very intelligent, and then they do not need. I mean, it's this kind of thing because they are born in these circumstances, and it's part of their own life, and they embodied it. So, I mean, finally, what I want to say is a privilege. You see, the location of the city, the bridges are consubstantial on it, and of course, you see, if I speak about Venice or or Jerusalem, it is because I was privileged to do a bridge in both cities. Now, once speaking with Mr. Kissinger, it happens to me to speak to Mr. Kissinger. I tell to him, just that he recognizes I have done something. I say, Mr. Kissinger, I built a bridge in Jerusalem, and he said to me, "How can you build a bridge? There is no river in Jerusalem." And I say to him, I know it's a miracle. And then he laughed about, So, I mean, I think, you see, this is also, I spoke about the stations and so, but you see, bridges, they are something essential and fundamental. You see, before, and then together with the stations are the biggest generators of cities. So imagine, for example, the city of New York. When the Brooklyn Bridge was built, Brooklyn was a small village on the other side of the rivers, you see, and then became the enormous city that it is today. And the same thing, when Grand Central was built, Park Avenue didn't exist. But also, if you look, the configuration of all the skyscrapers are in the center of gravity is Grand Central. It's Grand Central who has generated all this development. So, I mean, it is by case that I came to these things, but certainly, my heart is very much propense, to do stations and to do bridges, because among the public buildings, probably they are the most public ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we need to take care of our bridges, right? Okay, there is a second question, if you have any. Okay, there is a lady in the fourth row. I hope there will be a chance to. Yeah, good call.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Calatrava, for being here with us. Thank you as well for organizing that exhibition. I'm really looking forward to visit it. And I spent a year in Lyon, like an Erasmus student, and I have to say my most favorite place in Lyon was the station that you built there, just next to the airport. But me personally, I really admire your work, but at the same time, I know that a lot of your buildings have been criticized for different reasons. For example, for the lack of details and so on. So I just want to ask you, how do you deal with all of the criticism against your work? And what do you feel maybe when you hear something critical to your work? Thank you.
Pero ¿de qué proyecto específicamente?
No de ningún proyecto. Dice que, o sea, ella es una fan de tu arquitectura, pero dice que no entiende la crítica. Lo único decirle que, o sea, cómo lo aguantas, o si no quieres contestar nada.
Sí, sí. You see, I mean, certainly, you see, you have to be not only modest, but you have to be also humble and accept critics. You see, that is something that happens. I have to say, you see, in those very large projects, as for example the Athens Olympics, built in such a short period of time, and also with, I mean, with a limited number of medals, you see, you have to deliver something, and I mean, of of course, these things can be subject to critic. Sometimes, speaking about music, this morning I wake up early. It was eventually 4 or 4:30, and I was working and hearing Claudio Arrau. Claudio Arrau is an enormous pianist, the impromptus of Schubert, and YouTube. So you can hear it with my headphones. And then I look, and then there was, you see, they are fingers up and fingers down. And there was also a lot of guys who don't like Claudio Arrau. I think Claudio Arrau is, for me, one of the most moving pianists, you see, you can hear. But, I mean, even that, you need to accept it, isn't it? You cannot. Even I want to tell you something. If you go to a city close, also a fantastic city, is Vienna. There is the secession building, in Karlplatz. You see, the secession building done by Olbrich, and with paintings of Klimt inside. And then there is a sentence when you enter in, written in the facade, who is der Kunst, der Kunst, ihre Zeit, der Kunst, die Freiheit. To the art, the time, or to the time, the art, and to the art, the freedom. And then inside, there is a sentence of Schiller, the poem, who says something like that. This is free spoken. It is, you should not be troubled because not everybody likes your work, he says. Weil sie nicht alle gefallen. An alle zu gefallen ist wurscht. To please everybody is not, wurscht means not nice, but more you have, anstrenge dich, make an effort, or make an effort to honor those who believe in your work. Or, more or less is that what, through your work to honor those who believe in your work. Thank you. I think it is important.
Thank you. One last question, please, from this side, maybe? From the right side? Okay. Lady in a second row. Just in front of me.
Good evening. I work for a company that specifies in facades, and I would like to ask you a question. If when you create a building, do you consider the aging of it in the beginning of your creative process? Because, the buildings do get older, and how do you think about it when you create?
I will have to repeat all the questions to be sure I understand them well, please.
Cuando haces un edificio, que si piensas en cómo va a envejecer. Porque ella es una experta.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, you see, this is a capital question, isn't it? I tell you why, because, you see, we has inherited a kind of approach to architecture, you see, who... we inherit, you see, in which, for example, the corniche should not exist. So, the rationalist architecture, started, taking away the corniche. Even there is a writing, a text of Frank Lloyd Wright called The Death of the Corniche. So there was, like, you see it happen, I speak about Frank Lloyd Wright, as I could also speak on behalf of also another great architect, Adolf Loos, ornament und Verbrechen, ornament and crime, so no ornament. So the fact that the corniche disappears, brings an exposure, an enormous exposure of the building, to the rain. And also the use of steel, which it is something I have done in many of my buildings, is also something who is related, is temporarily related, because even the best coating material you can use gives you only a guarantee of 10 years, eventually 12. So finally, they are this thing, at the one side, our vocabulary often, per nature, is neglecting a research done along centuries of the importance of elements like corniche, you see, to protect the facades and to protect the facades from the rain and to deliver shadow or protection. And I am part of this school, you know, because I grew with this school. So that is already a contingent I am confessing here in front of you. The second part means also that if you are using a material, because it's convenient for the fact, and it is, you see, you are also related to the fact that after 10 years, it should be renovated, it should be repainted, like they do in La Tour Eiffel. You know, they are starting up, you see, or they started down, arrive up, and then they started again down, you know, to repaint it, because it takes more than 10 years to paint the whole Tour Eiffel. And then you will see that this is an obligation which is not by the architect, it is by the client. So buildings needs maintenance, and we should also be very energetic, you know, demanding from our clients that they also pay a little bit of money in maintenance, you see, which they very often don't do. So, I mean, it's also, it is unjust very often just to put all the responsibility in the architect when the client is not investing a single cent, you know, in renovating, you know, changing parts of the building, who logically they get used and because they are very exposed or because simply they have a certain life. And we are no more doing buildings in stone. And even the buildings in stone, they need also even maintenance, isn't it? And the copper roof, they need also maintenance. And eventually today we cannot use any more copper because the copper oxide is polluting and all of that. You understand? It is, I mean, I'm just saying that our culture is also finally, and this is also another contingent of our time, that we all, not only architects, but also the society and the clients and the investors and the public authorities, you know, forgot that the buildings survive us. They go not only over 10 years, but they go eventually over 30, 50, even 100 years, like many buildings here in the city. And so we are even more polluted because when people are doing an investment, they would like to earn the money as it was in the bank. It means it has to be amortized according to the so-called hypothecar interest, you know, or mortgage interest, you see. So if it is 3.5%, after so much time, you know, you have to get your money back, and then, but still the building is there, isn't it? And the building needs maintenance, and it is, and so I mean, it's something who needs also to be revised at two levels, finally, coming out of your question, to rethinking a little bit what are the effective architectural elements who protects the building and protect it from sunshine or there eventually rain and things like that. And then the other side is also that the client has to reflect about the fact that they have to put also money beyond the building, you know, to maintain it in a proper way and to restore it, and to, because the things are not done forever, and this is the reality of our everyday profession, isn't it?
Well, thank you very much, Santiago. Christine, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for answering our questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again. Thank you that you came here. I hope you're going to visit the exhibition that starts tomorrow. It's going to run until September, if I'm not mistaken. So there will be plenty of time to see it, and I hope that we're going to meet during some inspirational event similar like this. Thanks again. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.